Hey everyone, it's Jason, and welcome to another Primal The Awakening. This is where we are going to start going over the monsters. If you checked out the previous videos, or if you haven't, this is a quick reminder or refresh. Video 1, we went over the kind of like the rules and overview, and video 2, we went over all the different, looked at a lot of the components and the tokens. We will review some of the tokens that are relevant to monsters in this set when we come across them. And then we did 4 videos with each one of the hunters from the core set. Just a separate thing. They had enough cards between their equipment and their action decks that I really wanted to make sure they stood out. So for the monsters, though, we are going to still break them up a bit, but we're going to do one element per video. So like we'll do fire, then horn, then coral, crystal, lightning, and then finally metal. Because they have a decent number of cards, but a lot of their stuff is duplicated for harder levels. So I don't think I need to spend as much time with each one. But these will be a little bit longer than the hunter videos. But before we hop into the actual going over every monster card, let's just do a brief rerun over what monster cards and some of their stats are at the beginning here. Then we can go ahead and hop into each one. So each monster will have several different types of cards. They will have stance cards. And the stance cards, I'll read over the text and we'll go back over these in just a moment. The stance card at the top here will have what level they're either 0, 1, 2, or 3. This is essentially your difficulty. 0 is prologue, 1, 2, and 3 have to deal with if you're playing the campaign. If you're doing expedition, just single matches, you can always opt to do the easier one if you'd like. Name of the monster, Kharja, stance 1, stance 1, 2, and 3. These are the different, kind of like, just positions it braces itself for throughout the battle. So as the battle takes longer to defeat them, as you're getting closer to defeating them, they change to harder stances, which we have a stance 2 switch over here. They get different abilities. They can do more damage. They can take more damage. So the little blood splotch here with the little helm next to it is how many wounds it takes, or how many, I believe, when we get to the actual wordage there, I believe it's how many hits they take. It's their toughness value, which we already knew that. I'm looking for the exact word there. Yeah, so toughness, so every time they take damage, the amount of damage tokens equal to the toughness value. So whenever they take damage, you put it on there. So like you have to do 2 per player. So if you're playing a 2-player game, it'd be 4 damage. Playing a 4-player game, it'd be 8 damage before they take a full hit of their hit points. So on their big giant sheet here, they'll have a health bar here, which the little heart is 0 and it starts here on 10. So when they take 2 per player amount, then they take a hit here, it drops down to 9, down to 8, down to 7, so on and so forth. And then once it hits 6, they flip over to their other stance. The little circle there is a reminder of where you can hit. The exposed sides are the red sides. Those are the sides that you're allowed to play attack cards in. The little slash mark is their damage, so anything that refers to doing them damage is how much their current stance is. So as they get through later stances, they can end up doing more or harder difficulties. They might do more. This includes attrition damage. So when we get to the attrition round, if a player takes damage from that, they take that damage as well. Alright. The other cards that everyone has also have multiple versions are their peril cards. These are special abilities that they will permanently have out based on what stance they're in. So like stance 1, stance 2, or stance 3. Gives them such a special effect. They're all double-sided. There's these little symbols in the bottom corner that will match what level. They'll match the level of the building for the monster. So some are for easy, some are for hard, or some are for difficult. So if we take a look here, so here's one example. That's upgrades. That's not what I'm looking for. Yeah, so each stance card will have a front and back side. Here we go. So if you're playing in Prologue, and these will also match the symbols on the behavior cards. So when you're playing in Prologue, each monster will have one of those symbols, which the perils all include, the front sides all include this dot here, which is in all three level 1, 2, and 3. And then the reverse side just has V. So it's only in level 3. So you play the one side for the first levels, and if you're playing level 3, which is the hardest, you flip it over and you play the harder one. And then there's behavior cards that will only appear with this symbol, will only appear in the Prologue. And there are some that are level 3 that will only appear in the V that will only appear in level 3. Otherwise, you'll have some from level 2 and 3 that cross over, some from 1 and 2 that cross over, and then some from 1 and 3, and then again, that symbol crosses through all 3, and that one crosses through all 3. So, this is kind of showing your behavior cards. So you have some with that symbol, some with that symbol, some with that symbol. And you choose all of them, that's how you make your beginning decks and all that stuff. But yeah, that'll be a constant threat you have to deal with that changes every time they change their stance. They also all have a peril card, or sorry, an objective card, which is something the hunters can do to try and, if they achieve this little goal, it's kind of like a critical strike or an extra hit on the monster. It's going to damage them more. But this is only relevant for certain fate or stances. So sometimes it'll be stance 1, sometimes stance 2, sometimes stance 3. It's different for each monster. But it'll help get you an extra little bonus hit on them, or if you can manage to complete it in time. But again, you have to do it during that stance. Then the behavior cards. So if we look at just the first one here, we'll have that little symbol that shows the Prologue symbol. Name of the ability, name, monster. Down here are boost abilities, which happen to, as your monster gains struggle throughout the game, if it plays one of these cards, it'll spend that struggle to perform this extra boost ability. So on one hand, that's kind of good, because then it keeps you from doing their unleash attack, but on the other hand, it also means this card's going to be more powerful. On the back of every card, we'll have the monster symbol, a picture that shows what the reaction is for. This one is when a player moves, and then the refresh rating. This will be the lowest level at the end during the refresh step goes away. So that way the abilities don't just sit out and wait for someone to activate them. And they'll disappear in turn, so this card will constantly be rotating around. So it does make it a little bit tricky. Now, what's also neat about this is just going to show off is here. So we have, every monster has 2 sets of each type of abilities. So you have Firepaw, which has the Prologue symbol, but then we have Firepaw that has this symbol. They have different abilities. They're slightly different. They can have slightly different boost abilities. So they'll always have 2 of the same named card. Just one's kind of an easier version, and then one shows up a little bit harder. So their deck should always be filled with the exact same named cards. Sometimes they might have them multiple times, maybe an easier or harder version, or just sometimes have duplicates of the same card. But that's what their deck is made of. And on the back of them is they both have run, but the easy one refreshes at 6, and the other one refreshes at 1. So they refresh at different rates. They might even potentially have different symbols on the back. That's our different monster stuff. What I also wanted to look at with the monsters was just going over how their turn works. Because they don't technically have a full turn. So all this stuff is based on the refreshing, or the reactions. So during the monster upkeep, which is step 2 of the game, monsters refresh with a behavior card. Discard a card at the lowest refresh value and place it at the top of the deck. If no more than 1, discard all and replace them. And then struggle. Monster gains 1 per player struggle. Each time that monster gains struggle, place a number of struggle tokens on the monster board. So early on, he gains them. So if you spent your last turn removing a bunch, this is their chance to gain a bunch up more before they do the reactions. Then the player gets to go. They do all their stuff. We do have struggle and unleash. When the monster gains struggle, the total amount of struggle accumulated is equal to or higher than 3 per player. Immediately solve the following order. So it is going to do this immediately. So if you're not removing stuff during their turn, the previous turn, the next turn, they might end up doing the unleash. All players immediately suffer an attack equal to the monster's damage. And remove struggle tokens until the monster has 1 per player. So if it unleashes at the end of 1 round, and at the beginning, if you didn't remove any during that entire round, then during your player turn, the next time it's going to gain 1 per player, so that'd be up to 2. So you can only potentially, generally, maybe go through like 2 or 3 rounds before it's going to unleash again if you don't remove anything. But again, if he plays boost cards, they're going to keep spending them. Some monsters focus on accumulating struggle to perform unleash, while others just spend struggle to boost their behavior. So it just depends on which monster it is doing which stuff. Then the last thing we're going to get to is I wanted to get to the attrition. As just a reminder. Where is the attrition page? Rampage, we did that. Card resolution, we know that. Alright, anyhow, when we get to the attrition, we get this little tiny deck. So what'll happen during the attrition stage is the players, right there, here we go, reveal the top card of the deck. Suffer attrition damage unless you have the number of defensive cards, parry or dodge, yellow or green, in your sequence equal to or higher than the attrition value. The attrition damage is equal to the monster's attack, which again will change potentially during stances. Then discard of the reveal thing. If you're a threat, you reveal 2 attrition instead. So our attrition cards will have a little defense on the back. There's a 3. So it's going to be hard to do because it matches the number of defense cards. You have to play 3 defense cards. We have a 2, a 2, and a 2. So again, so we have 4 of them there. We have 1, 2, 3, 4, and we have 5 of them that are 1s, and then we have a 0. So over half of the attrition deck is going to be 0 or 1. So as long as you play 1 defense every card, you're pretty much safe, but you just gotta watch them other couple of times they hit. And then that thing is, again, if you're threatened, you have to draw 2, so you might end up getting a 1, and then you might, well, I'm safe, but then you draw a 2, and then you're in trouble. I also bring this up because there are some monsters that will have their own special attrition cards, which have special effects and stuff. They'll kind of be color-coded to the monster, plus have their symbol, but the backs are going to match exactly, so you don't know where they are. They just get shuffled in the deck. Cool. So that is that. And the last thing I want to go over with each monster, really quick, is, so we have their big giant boards here. So you have their picture, which so it matches the back of their deck, so you can easily match them up quick if you need to. Their element, fire, weakness, which also includes the expansion weaknesses. So if you don't have the ice expansion, for example, just ignore it. Their health meter at the top. 3 spots for their behavior cards, and on the bottom we have a spot for your stance, your peril, and your objective card. There will be some monsters that occasionally have an additional, like Vyraxen only has 3 here, might have an additional little meter on there, such as Toramont here, who will have hardening, a little extra meter there. Some monsters add extra additional cards to their deck, like we showed them attrition cards. Some might have other extra special cards that interact and maybe go in the player's deck. Maybe they create extra wounds, do stuff like that. So we'll see those as we go through each monster. Alright, so yeah, this first video is going to be a little bit longer, just because I wanted to go kind of refresh everybody on that, and I can send everyone back and go watch this video if they want to know. But we are going to start with Kharja. Alright, so we're going to go ahead and look at his cards. I'm going to bring out a second easel here. I hear people like my easels. Not easier than holding cards. So if we look at stance number 1, so we kind of already saw this a little bit because we had it up there. So another thing to just point out before I get too far in this, every element has 2 monsters until we get to the Kickstarter expansion Nightmare Box, and we add some extra new monsters. But in general, each element has 2 monsters. One that is generally like some sort of animal or creature. The other one that I would describe as a dragon. So that's kind of neat. So we're going to go over the creature ones first and do the dragon second. So in the prologue version of Kharja, he has 2 toughness. At 6, he switches to stance and does 1 damage. So at the start of each round, each player exhausts a potion. So that's going to make him just hard enough to defeat right away, because you spent money to use a potion, and it's going to get... Now, luckily, it only exhausts it. Just means you can't use it for the game. It doesn't, like, consume it or get rid of it. So you still will have it later on. Then what I wanted to do, so I might need to back this up just a little bit more. I like having them kind of zoomed in so you guys can see a little bit easier. But I was trying to have it so we could have the next level card up next, so you can kind of compare them to see how they evolve. So stance 2, he goes up to 3, and then now he'll change when he's down to 2 health. But his flanking and stuff all stays the same. But it says, when revealed, place a fire terrain on each damaged sector on the board. So then we'll get these fire terrain tokens, which you've seen in the other video. They have a red side and a yellow side, which some people say are kind of hard to tell apart. I can see it at a glance. They could have made that a little bit better. But it's not too bad. If you're hard of seeing, I could definitely get her color issues. So fire tokens, because both fire characters are going to use them, just as a refresher in case you didn't, or if you didn't watch the terrain video. Fire can be placed, when a fire token comes into play, is placed on the board with its red side faced up. At the end of the round, flip any fire token to the yellow side. If it is on yellow, remove it from the game instead. So it takes 2 rounds to get rid of it. Note, if you're instructed to place a fire token there's already a fire token, that flip that fire token to its red side instead. All players suffer burning. So the other consequence of having fire is, well, there's a fire in your sector, regardless if it's red or yellow, you cannot play cards in your sequence. So when stance 2 is revealed, he will then throw a fire in each damaged sector, which we'll see in his behavior cards how he damages it, I'm sure. He'll explain how to damage a sector. And then, yeah, but just to place him out there, that means you can't do damage in those sectors. You gotta worry that if he places more fire in there, that you'll get a burning effect. And what does burning do exactly? We'll just mention that because he does do that a couple of times. If that's just a little red token, we'll get a little fireball. It says, when you suffer burning, take a corresponding burning token, place it on your hunter board. The next time you empty your deck, discard the burning token, and suffer damage equal to your weapon level. If you already suffered burning, if you suffer burning but already have a burn token, discard the top 5 cards of your deck instead. Note, damage suffered from burning is different than fatigue damage. It should be different source, so must be dealt with separately. So that means if you're burning, when your deck empties, you gotta take damage from your weapon for your weapon level for fatigue, and then you have to take another one for your for being burnt. So yeah, being in a fire zone is bad because you can't play cards. If you get hit again, you start burning. If you get hit with burning twice, you have to discard more cards. He's basically going to be trying to eliminate your deck or hurt you for having your deck. So yeah, he's kind of mean like that. Alright, so there's level 2. So let's switch to stance 3. So now he has 5 toughness. Now his flanks are now his weak spots, so he changes there. But it says, when revealed, advance the round to marker 8. If he's already at 8 or beyond, Kharja gains 1 struggle per player. So he is just right here at the end. He gets to his last 2 spots. He has 2 health left. He's trying to advance the game and get it to end. Like, right, he's going to move it to the end. You guys have now 2 rounds to beat everything. Which means if there's any fire that just got placed, it might not dissipate in time to get rid of it. Or if it's already that late in the game, you took that long to take him out, he's going to gain an extra struggle, which means he might unleash, like, right after that. He could potentially, unleash as soon as that happens. So that's our prologue version. So then if we take those cards and we flip them over, we have stance 1, or we have level 1 up here. So now you can see, so he started with 2, and he had, now he has 5. So it starts with 5 there in his level 1, but he keeps some of the same stuff. At the start of each round, the start of round 1, each player exhausts a potion. When he jumps to stance 2, it goes up to 7 toughness. It has when revealed, place a fire token or terrain on each damage sector of the board. So those two basically stay the same. He just gets stronger for his level 1. And I think most prologue to level 1 are going to be basically that. They're just going to be a little bit easier. I don't think until you start getting to level 2s and level 3s are they going to really change. Because I hear his stance 3 is the same exact thing. So nothing extra special there. Alright, then if we jump to level 2, his stance 1, he starts with 10 toughness. He also is a little bit harder to take out because it goes to 7 before it was 6 on the other guys. Plus he has 2 attack, so he does more damage to you. At the start of each round 1, each player exhausts a potion. So that starts with him. But also note that his flank changes the other direction. Or his exposed sides. So it changes a little bit. And if we go to stance 2, now he's up to 16 toughness. When revealed, place a counter on Kharja and a fire terrain in each damage sector of the board. So as of now, we don't know what counters do, or we don't know how to damage sectors. But we will definitely find out as we look at the rest of his cards. That's the thing with the monsters as opposed to the hunters. The hunters, you can kind of see a theme, like very quickly, of what this guy's doing. You can see that here, but you have to wait until you get the full picture to know exactly what he's doing. So then with stance 3, he has 20 toughness per player. When revealed, advance the round to marker 8. If he's already at 8 or beyond, he gains 1 struggle. So that kind of stays the same. So the only thing that really changes his abilities is on stance 2, now he starts getting counters. And if we jump to the hardest difficulty, at least for now, because there is a nightmare version in the one expansion box. I think there's a nightmare version of him. But now at stance, or level 3, stance 1, he has 15 toughness per player, and he does 3 damage. Same ability, though, he exhausts a potion. For stance 2, so he places 2 counters on Kharja and a fire terrain each damage sector. Players in those sectors suffer burning. So now he doesn't even care if there's already a fire there. He's just going to burn you anyhow. But this definitely means what could potentially happen is if you're already in a fire terrain and he places another fire terrain there, you're going to gain burning from that, and then he's going to give you burning again, so it might give you that second one to make you discard. If unfortunately you already had burning when all this happens, you could get burning 2 more times. You have to discard 10 cards from your deck. Which then means you have to once you're discard, you have to shuffle your deck and you have to take your burning damage to get rid of that counter. So that could be a pretty nasty combo. And I got 25 health per player. And then if we up to level 3, he's got 30 health per player, does 5 damage. When revealed, advance around to marker 8 unless it's already 8 or beyond, he unleashes. So instead of just gaining extra struggle, now he just straight up unleashes on you for 5 damage. It's at the end of the round. So you really have to be paying attention to when you flip that. So you kind of got to control when to take him out. Because if you wait too long and you do it, then he's just going to automatically hit you. And you might not be able to afford taking that 5 damage for 2 rounds. So that's that's Kharja's abilities. So let's look at his stance, or his, not stances, his peril cards. So he has In the Clutches of Fire. At the start of the round, discard the top card of the behavior deck. If it has Claw, players in the front sector suffer an attack. So we'll see some of the behavior cards will have extra little keywords like this that say claws. These work much like the traits do on the hunters, where they had the ones at the bottom, like aim or impetus. for example. So those work the same way, but monsters can have them as well. Yeah, so him discarding his behavior deck doesn't hurt him whatsoever. So yeah, he's just trying to find that one. So yeah, if you're not in the front sector, then this isn't going to do any damage to you at all. It's not even going to be an issue. Then if we flip it over, we have the harder side. So it says at the start of the round, discard the top card of the behavior deck. If the player has claws, suffer it. So it does the same thing. It's just the harder one. You might be like, well, why did they make it the exact same? I think the idea is just because some monsters might have different abilities or harder abilities from one peril to the other for easy to hard. It's just easier to make them all have a easy side and a hard side, rather than having you have to stop and look at each one to decide, whether you need to have which symbol. It's either play side A or side B. We have on stance 2, we have Burning Sting. Now he's immune to blind. When Kharja suffers a wound, place a counter on Kharja. So this is going to be, this is going to be very important for later on, him getting counters every time he's wounded. And then it says when a player suffers attrition damage, that player suffers an additional 1 damage for each counter on Kharja. So right there. So every time you wound him, I need to move these so I don't roll these over. Yeah, every time you wound him, he's going to make his attrition damage even worse. So normally it might be, since whatever his attack is, it could be 1, 2, 3, could be up to 5, depending on what it is. But, yeah, every time you damage him, he's just going to be, attrition is going to be harder and harder. So what this really means for him is you're going to want to hit him big. Like, example, if you're going to do 40 damage to him, you're going to want to hit him with an attack that does 40 damage, as opposed to 4 attacks that do 10 damage each. Because the 40 will put 1 counter on him. Because he suffers, it's when he suffers a wound. So it's just full-on hit points, I guess. It's not his toughness. But still, it's like, yeah, you want to make sure you probably take him out as quickly. Like, you can hit him and do a couple in a row versus doing little tiny ones. Because then maybe, you can kill him quicker. He's going to be a pain, either way. Just for a reminder what blind does, so we know why he's immune to it. It says, this is a keyword ability. When you flick blind, choose a peril card that is in play. That peril is considered to be blank until the start of your next turn. So basically, players cannot negate this card with blind. Alright, and then the harder side, when he suffers, when you put 2 counters on him, and then he suffers 1 additional damage for each counter. So it's just going to make it even harder. Then his final one for stance 3 is Fire Burst. When a player suffers attrition damage, that player suffers 1 additional damage for each counter. So, as of this point, he doesn't keep adding more counters on him, but he is going to still do extra damage for that attrition. This is at the end of the round. If Kharja's health is 1, all players suffer attack plus X, where X is the number of counters on Kharja. So, this again kind of goes with his stance abilities, where when he hits round 8, he's trying to speed stuff, or he hits his 3rd stance, he's trying to speed it to round 8 to end stuff quicker. This kind of goes in the same way as you get him down to 1 health. He's going to try and take you out as quickly as possible. At the end of the round, if he's down to that 1 health, if you haven't finished him off. So pretty much you get him down there, you're going to want to try and get him down to 2 health. You're going to probably want to try and take him down all the way to 0 and not give him a chance to trigger this. So that's pretty cool. And then his other side, his harder side, is immune to blind, suffer additional damage in attrition, but the last part's a little different. At the end of the round, if Kharja's health is 1, place a fire turn in each sector, and all players suffer 1 attack plus X, where X is the number of counters on Kharja. So basically, when this hits, you can't play any more cards. Because when he gets down to 1 health, he puts a fire terrain. Fire terrain means you can't play cards in your sector. You can still use abilities on if you had any cards out. You can't add cards to your sequence, though. So if you maybe have something on, like, possibly if you have an ability that triggers off, like, your helmet or your weapon or maybe your mastery card, you might be able to use that, hopefully be able to do enough damage to take him out. But yeah, you're gonna, again, you get him like this, you're not gonna want him to get down to that level 1. Alright, then we have his objective card. So far as objective is keep your distance. So in stance 2 only. So when he flips to stance 2, you put this out or it triggers. He has permanent. If you play a green dodge card, you may place a counter on this card, max of 3. If you do, immediately end your action phase and prevent attrition damage this turn. So this is kind of a neat one, because some of them, the monster is going to be like, do this, it's going to do something to hurt the monster, or turn off one of their abilities, or make them easier to fight. This is going to just basically shut off his stance 2 thing, or his peril 2, where he does extra damage during the attrition. Yeah, then you just got to play a green card to eventually build this up, and then you place a time, end your action phase to prevent attrition damage this turn. So if you're kind of keeping an eye on your cards that have been coming out, and you're like, okay, we got a couple of the 1s, we got one of the 2s, ooh, we haven't gotten that 3 yet, though, you might even kind of be paying enough attention to that. You might be able to be like, okay, he's got 4 counters on him, and we're going to draw that 3 next turn. Most likely, there's no way we're going to avoid it. You might just end up having to spend this. So that's kind of cool. And then if we flip it to the other side, I think it's the same. Oh, it's a little bit different. So you prevent the attrition damage, but Kharja also gains 1 struggle. So not only does this help you stay alive, but it also helps him a little bit. Just kind of mean. But that's what it is, right? Alright, so let's look at his behavior cards. So we're going to do this. Up front, we have 2 of them with the foot icon, which means when a player moves. So we have Firepaw. It says, discard the top card of the behavior deck. If that card has Claw, the active player suffers an attack. So this is kind of like his first peril card. But he also has Boost. The active player becomes threatened. So that way he's trying to, again, make you have to do more attrition damage. And if we flip over the other one, which is the harder version, discard the top card of the behavior deck. If that has Claw, active player suffers an attack and becomes threatened. And then there's a Boost, which has enhancement. The active player suffers attack times 2 instead of 1. So yeah, the enhancement is just a little keyword to remind that it will boost the card effect. You'll actually change the effect of that, or the text of that card. Then the next one we have has a tail icon. So it means if you start the round in the... Start the round, or is it end the round? I think it's start the round in the tail sector. I'm going to just double check, make sure it's start and not end. I believe it was start. Yeah, start their turn in the rear sector. And you start in the rear sector, then this card behavior will trigger. Which we have Cat-like Spring, which has Claw on it. Turn Kharja to the active player. Boost 2, the active player skips their movement phase this turn. So yeah, if you start basically on his butt, he's going to turn around at you, spring around like a cat, you know, that's what he is. He's a Hellcat. Oh, we didn't look at his miniature. We'll look at that at the end. Yeah, and then he turns towards you, so that kind of negates the fact that you were behind him. And depending on where his exposed side is, that could be very bad for you. So the harder one has the same effect there, but it says boost 2, the active player skips their movement phase and discards a parry from their hand. So that's going to make them a little bit harder. The next set of cards is we have if you're in the front sector where his mouth is. You see some of these have the same number, some don't, it just kind of depends. If we flip this one over, we have Ember Dash. The active player cannot be assisted this turn. It boosts. The active player skips their movement phase unless they reveal a dodge from their hand. So you can kind of get around you unless you play a special dodge card. Then if we flip it to this one, is how different these can get. So he has, for the duration of this turn, the active player cannot be assisted and must only use dodge to generate stamina for movement. So the easier one, he has to rely on a boost, so hopefully he has struggle tokens to spend. Even if he does, he's spending them, so he's not going to unleash as much. And then you just have to reveal a card. The harder one now is actually, though, making you have to spend them for a movement. So you can still move, but you have to spend green to do it. So it's almost worse than skipping your phase. Alright, then we have another one for his front side. We'll flip that one over. Maybe. Terrifying Gaze. Kharja gains 1 per player -1 struggle. So interesting, he actually loses struggle for this. The active player skips their turn unless another player discards an attack from their hand. If the active player is the only player standing, they must discard an attack from their hand instead. It's just kind of neat. Like, he's glaring at you enough that you can't move. He's not struggling anymore, right? He's taken the initiative, right? That's the idea behind this. But now they have to discard. Someone has to discard an attack from their hands to kind of like maybe distracting him enough, jarring him enough out of there. But then we have the upgraded version, which is actually the opposite right here. So he gains 1 struggle per player, so now instead he's focusing to unleash. The active player discards all red cards from their hand. And if there are 2 or more players standing, the active player skips their turn unless another player discards a card from that. So this just significantly changes, right? Just one player might have to some players to discard a card, an active player loses their turn. Here they automatically lose all red cards regardless. And then if there's 2 or more, someone still has to play one or they skip their turn. So they could potentially lose a lot of stuff in that round. But now you can definitely see how now this is going from like some of these might have been just in the earlier or only in level 1. Some of these might now have only been in level 2. We can see where they're getting harder and harder. They're going to start changing a little bit more drastically. We're also getting into the icons where now the first one we had, the first couple, like the easy side, we're only in the prologue. Now we're getting to the point where none of these are in prologue anymore. They're only going to be in level 1 or maybe only in level 2 and 3. So these are reactions. This is reactions off of something else. So if anything else triggers, then this will trigger. We have Rising Temperature. Kharja gains 1 per player struggle. In stance 1, place a damage token in the front sector. So now we're finally finding out how we damage them, because we had his stance inside put a fire token in each damage sector. So this is how he's going to do it. And then the upgraded, or the harder version, also gains Claw. Has 1 struggle per player, places a damage token in the front sector. And then if you're in stance 3, each player must either exhaust a potion card or discard a card from their hand. Crazy. Then we're going to get some triggers off of some red cards. We have Fiery Mane. Kharja becomes vulnerable. The active player suffers damage plus X, where X is the number of counters on Kharja. So we had stance 2, it wants to put a bunch of those on there. On Kharja's chest, the skin splits open and its heart begins to beat red hot like the caldera of a volcano. That's nice flavor text. I'm glad you don't have flavor text on every card, just because it would pull away from the cards, but it's kind of cool to have it a little bit here and there. But yeah, that's kind of a mean card. But he becomes vulnerable, so like, it's like he can do extra attack, but now you can hit him really hard after that, because you can do double damage, but you need to take advantage of it. And then the upgraded version, same thing, becomes vulnerable. X attack plus X number of counters, but the player also suffers burning. Only resolve the boost effect if this is in stance 2 or 3. The boost is place a fire cry in each damage sector on the board, then remove all damage from all sectors. Cool. Yeah, throwing fire everywhere. Definitely mean. So these ones are the end of the turn. So at the end of the turn, these are going to trigger regardless. These are kind of like the worst ones because all the other ones you could opt, maybe I won't move, maybe I won't play a red card, maybe I won't be in that sector at the beginning of the round if you can hopefully help it. You can't really do much about end of the turn outside of putting a confusion token on it. I believe that's what stun token on there. Onslaught with Claw. Each player in the front and the flank sectors suffer an attack unless they reveal a parry card from their hand. Boost Enhancement. The Argo player must reveal 2 parries instead. And if we upgrade that, we have each player in the front and flank sector suffers unless they reveal 2, so it just adds that boost to it. The boost, all players discard a defense from their hand, and that hits every player, so that's even mean, right? It's not just enhancing that one. Alright, then we have another end of the turn one, which is Spirit of the Waltar, which is the fiery region. Threatened players suffer attack plus X for X's the number of counters on Kharja. Cool. So again, depending on how many, he's gonna get counters in step 2 no matter what. That's just going to happen in stance 2. And then the harder ones, threatened players suffer X plus damage plus X for X's number of counters, and those players suffer burning. Then we have this one. So this is neat. This is the first time we've seen different pictures on there. So the easier one only triggers if you play 2 attack cards in a row. And the other one only triggers with 1. So the other one's going to hit more often. But that can be a blue or a red card. Hellfire. The active player suffers attack unless they reveal a parry from their hand. Boost. The active player suffers an attack unless they discard a parry from their hand. So this can actually hit them twice. Potentially. And if we flip to the harder one, also gains that claw effect. Each player in the active player sector suffers an attack unless they reveal a parry from their hand. So the first one only hits the active player. The harder one hits all players in that sector. And then boost, each player in the active sector suffers an attack unless they discard a yellow from their hand. And then our final one will attack with the mouth side, the front sector, which is Flaming Tails. Each player in the rear sector must either immediately move or suffer attack plus X for X's number of counters on Kharja. The tails of Kharja whip the rocky ground and dart into the air like tongues of fire ready to seize and incinerate its prey. Cool. And then the last card is each player in the rear sector must either move immediately or suffer damage plus X for X's number of counters. Also, players who choose to move must discard a green card from their hand to generate stamina. Interesting. So what's really cool about him is he's going to place his fire out. He has some counters just to do to make him harder, so as you do more damage to him. But then also the fact that on the back of his cards, if you look at his reactions, front sector, back sector doesn't really have anything for on the flanks. He has a couple for attack, but he has nothing for defense. So if you're playing defense cards, none of his stuff is going to trigger. And then even the attacks, it's some red, couple regular attacks, but yeah. Here's his model. That skin looks really awesome. I really gotta see how someone paints that. Like the burning embers inside. Yes, it's kind of neat. Because you're going to get some monsters that are going to really punish you for attacking. Some will punish you for doing this. You can kind of see what you need to do for that. There's the lines for his front sector. Alright, we're going to hop right into the next monster. We'll look at his miniature first. We have Vyraxen, who's our dragon. Again, this might not be your standard dragon. I say they're all either like a creature type or a dragon type. So I just classified this as the dragon type. Typically, big giant claws, tail, wings. Not always wings. There's a couple that don't have any. But I'd still classify them more dragon than looking like a regular creature. But really cool. If we look at his card here, his little deck divider. Also neat because there's little fiery dragons on his wings, which are really cool. Alright, so let's head into his deck and see what he does against us. So, at level 0, stance 1, 2 toughness, 1 defense. But you can see right away, difference between him and Kharja at stance 1 for prologue is the weakness spots right there. Plus, he has no special abilities. Alright, back these up. Just trying to get these back into frame. Alright, so for stance 2, he goes up to 3. When revealed, Vyraxen gains 1 per player struggle. Cool. And then if we get to stance 3, when revealed, place a fire token in each threatened sector. Cool. So a threatened sector is anywhere that has a threatened character, but now he's weak on all 4 sides. So you can take, but he also does 2 damage. But yeah, dropping potentially, your team's spread out enough, he can drop fire everywhere. That is stance 2. Let's look at stance 1. Stance 1, he has 5. Now he does get an ability. At the start of round 1, Vyraxen gains -1 struggle per player. So that's actually kind of helpful for you. In stance 2, when revealed, he gains 1 struggle per player. So he seems a little bit easier right now than Kharja, just in his stance cards. It doesn't mean he's necessarily like a pushover though. And then his level 3 or stance 3 is when revealed, place a fire terrain in each threatened sector. Because you have to see why he might have a better way to drop threatened areas. Because Kharja only generally put fire for the most part in spots that were damaged. So you had to get his 1 or 2 cards that damage stuff so that then he could put the fire in there. It's kind of just like an erupting volcano was my assumption, where this is him more or less breathing fire. This is Vyraxen just spitting the hot fire. So at level 2 we have stance 1, start round, Vyraxen gains -1 struggle per player. In stance 2, when revealed, he gains 1 struggle per player. All players discard the top 3 cards of their deck. Ooh boy, that could suck because that might get you your fatigue damage quicker. And then stance 3, when revealed, place a fire terrain in each threatened sector. Players in those sectors discard the top 2 cards of their deck. So you can definitely see that. Plus, with fire, also if he can get you to be burning, that's going to make a difference too, because then the quicker he empties your deck, the more quicker you're going to take that burn damage. And then if we flip that over, we have stance 1 for level 3. Start of each round, place a fire terrain in the front sector. Vyraxen gains 1 struggle per player. So I immediately see how much harder he becomes, right? These level 3s are no joke. And then stance 2, when revealed, gain 1 per player struggle. All players discard the top 3 cards of their deck. Yeah, that's mean. And then his final one is when revealed, place a fire terrain in each threatened sector. Each player in a sector discards the top 2 cards of their deck. Again, he's going up to 5. And I'm not going to do this for every monster all the time, but just as for the first guy, just to compare. So, Kharja stance 3. Level 3 stance 3. Also like 30 health, 30 toughness. He had 5 damage, but he had 1 less weak spot. So, yeah, there's a little bit of difference there between the guys. But that doesn't necessarily mean anything, right? Each one's gonna have different things. Some might be stronger, some might be weaker. Might have higher toughness or lower toughness. Some might do more or less damage. But their behavior cards could definitely change up and make that a little bit irrelevant. For his first peril card, we have Fire Breathing. At the end of the round, if the aggro player is threatened to place a fire terrain in the front sector. So yeah, it doesn't even matter where they are. He's just going to hopefully probably spew some fire in there. And the harder side is at the end of the round, place a fire terrain in the front sector, threaten players in that sector suffer burning. So this one just immediately says, doesn't care, they're threatened, he's going to drop fire anyhow, and then hopefully burn them. Stance 2, we have Wall of Flames. When a behavior card with Firestorm is revealed, so it's like Claws, immediately place a fire terrain in the front sector. So again, he's spewing fire out, so he wants to place them whichever direction he's facing. And this is going to kind of make some characters like Thorg harder to play against him, because his deck is all about usually trying to move to the front and smash the monster in the face. So yeah, the fact is he's trying to always have lots of stuff that lets him move to the front or ways to move to the front. He's probably not going to want to be in front of Vyraxen very often, because otherwise he's going to keep getting set on fire. And the harder one says, Infuriate. 2, 6, and 9. So when a behavior card with Firestorm is revealed, immediately place a fire terrain in the front sector. So Infuriate is a special ability or keyword for Vyraxen. Your other guys might have it as well, but it says, during the monster upkeep, if the peril, the keyword is Infuriate is in play, monster gains an additional struggle based on the number of aggro cards collectively the players have in hand. So ones you'll have that little red symbol. If they collectively have at least the first number, he gains 1. If they have the middle, he gains 2. If they have the last one, he gains 3. So at the beginning of the upkeep, when he's gaining a struggle, they're going to look to see if how many aggro cards each player has. And if they have at least 2, collectively, he's going to gain 1 extra struggle. If they have up to 9, he's going to gain 3. So this could definitely kick off his Unleash ability a lot quicker. That's pretty cool. Then for our third stance, we have Inferno. When a behavior card with Firestorm is revealed, immediately place a fire terrain in the front sector. Players in that sector become threatened. So you have threaten those guys. If they're in that sector, set them on fire. There's already fire there. It's going to reignite it, set them on burning. If they already had burning and it was on fire, they're going to burn again and then take that burn damage. Definitely see like how this could be very painful. And the harder is also going to give them that Infuriate. Otherwise, says front sector, puts a fire in that front sector. Player is threatened, suffers burning, and becomes threatened. So here it's going to place that fire there. They're going to suffer burning, and then they're going to become threatened. So this could definitely stack. Alright, so his objective is hit the tail. So this only works in stance 1. It's a permanent. Play 2 attack cards, so red or blue. If you're in the rear sector, place a counter on this card. When there are 3 counters per player on this card, Vyraxen suffers 2 wounds, then remove this card from the game. So this is basically like, to begin off, he wants people to be in front of him so he can shoot fire at him, but you're trying to get around, smack him in the tail. You can give him 2 wounds, which will help flip him over quicker. So most of them, it's like his stance 2, he goes at 7. For the first difficulty, yeah, for all the difficulties, he flips over at 7. So if he starts at 10, and you manage to do this before you fully wound him, that would drop him down to 7. Drop him down to 8. So I need to hit him one more time to flip him. So he needs to take 3 full wounds to finish off, to knock him down. So it's kind of cool. It's like a weakness card, is more or less what it is. That was the harder side. This was the easier side. Same thing, but it's two per player, or 2 counters per player. So it's a little bit easier on the easier side. But yeah, that's kind of neat. So as opposed to where Kharja's was all about, his was about ignoring that attrition phase. This one's about doing extra damage. So it's kind of a neat difference between them. Alright, so we have we'll just look at them like this. So we have our first one. So this is, again, kind of neat because they have different symbols. Both attack, but one's blue and one's red. Our first one is Wrath of the Dragon. Vyraxen turns to the active player, then places a fire in the front sector. And then it has boost if the active player suffers attack unless they have a defense in their sequence. So yeah, you basically want to make sure before you play that blue one, you play the green one. But again, unless you're memorizing these cards, this is going to be some fun, tricky stuff to try and remember, right? Oh, crap. What does that blue one do? And there might be characters that sometimes have, 2 or 3 cards that have those same reaction symbols. Now you have to try and remember exactly which one's which. It's kind of interesting. Then his harder version is Vyraxen turns the active player, places a fire terrain, and then the active player suffers an attack +1 unless they have it in their sector. So he just doesn't rely on the boost. Alright, up next we have defense. We have greens. So now he's hitting more colors than Kharja did. The active player becomes threatened. Vyraxen's eyes, or flaming gaze. Vyraxen's eyes burn with the indomitable fury. Its gaze awakens a primal instinct in your heart. He just threatens you, which has a couple of cards that trigger off of that. And then his harder one, just all players become threatened. He's like, yeah, just gonna threaten everybody. End of the turn. We have aggression. Each player in the front sector must either immediately move or suffer an attack. And remember, if it says immediately move, you have to still pay for that, right? So if you can't afford it because you spent all your cards by the time this card came up, then you can't do it, right? Then Vyraxen turns to the player with the fewest defense in their hand. Cool. So they're going to come at you. And then the harder one. Each player in the front sector must either move or suffer damage. Then Vyraxen turns to the player with the fewest cards. So that player is threatened, they suffer an attack. Boost, enhancement. Players that choose to move must generate stamina by discarding 8 greens. This is going to even make it harder to move. Smoldering Fire. Well, I guess I didn't. Should have looked at the back of the card. We have when you are threatened. Again, he has lots of stuff that threaten you, so that'll trigger this. He has Smoldering Breath, which is Firestorm. Vyraxen gains 1 struggle per player. The veins on Vyraxen's neck suddenly swell up and a thick steam rises from its nostrils, getting ready to blow on you. And then the harder one, gains 1 struggle per player. All players discard the top 2 cards of their deck. Ooh, he's hurting your deck. So again, here we have 2 attacks, both 4. So I did want to look at this one here. So this first one was also an attack with 4. So now you have to decide, you have to figure out, oh crap, was it the Wrath of the Dragon? Or is it whatever this card is? So it's like, even still, some of those are going to make these harder to, like, you can't just be like, oh, the red one does this, the blue one does this. So Blazing Assault. The active player discards the top 3 cards of their deck. The player suffers damage unless a defense card is discarded this way, which you can't necessarily help. There are some cards that let you stack your deck, but it's whether you have that or not. 2 boosts repeats the base ability of this effect. Ooh. So it might make you discard 6 cards, potentially taking 2 damage. And the harder one, active player discards the top 2 cards of their deck and suffers an attack unless a yellow card was discarded. So, less cards you have to discard, so less of a chance of finding it, and it has to be a yellow defense instead of just any defense. If the active player is threatened, repeat this effect once more. And then if you play 2 boost, this targets all players in the active sector. So it might not, the boost might not necessarily hit, it's going to hit everybody, but it might not, because it has to be threatened, it might not always activate twice. It's a little bit different. Then we have some more attack cards. So you can see here, he's not going to like being attacked. Otherwise, he's going to trigger a lot more off of these red cards. Versus like how Kharja was. And these have a refresh of 2, so they'll flip over fairly quick. What makes sense, the red cards would probably go quicker. Sudden Blaze. If the active player discards top 3 cards of their deck and suffers damage unless a defense was discarded. And then the harder one is going to, and they both have Firestorm. The active player discards top 2 cards of their deck. That player suffers damage unless a yellow is discarded. The player is threatened to repeat once. So kind of is very similar. In the front sector, you're standing in front of his mouth. I'm guessing you're getting set on fire. Oh, not this one. Thunderous Growl. Vyraxen gains struggle -1 per player, but gets +1 attack until the end of round. So I think anytime anything else triggers after this, he's going to get an extra damage point. And that includes cards like this. That includes trigger or attrition damage. Anything where it does something where it reads his attack. And then the harder one gains the Firestone keyword and gains 1 struggle and gains 2 attack. So there, if it's 1 struggle per player hits Unleash, he gets extra 2 damage towards everybody. Oh boy. So here's a reaction, a Rampage, which is going to be Flamethrower. Place a fire token, terrain token in the front sector. A firestorm strikes the battlefield and illuminates the ravenous modes on Vyraxen's wings, ready to feed off the flames. This is kind of cool because this is, I did mention his arms have little flame tattoos, or dragon mouth tattoos, so it's kind of referencing those. Boost. Each player in the front sector suffers damage unless they discard a green card from their hand. I do not want to even see what the harder one is. Place a fire terrain in the front sector. Players suffer burning. Of course they do. Boost. Each player in the front sector suffers damage +1 unless they discard a green from their hand. Alright, then the final one. So this has 2 different icons as well. So we have, if you're in the tail sector, and then the other one has a moving tail, which is start of the player's turn if there's at least 1 player in the rear sector. So the easier one is only if the active player. The harder one is if anyone is in there, which is really fun. Like, right? Because now you have to definitely watch who's playing which turn. Whipping Tail. The active player suffers an attack unless they discard a green card from their hand. If hit the tail objective hasn't been completed, this card has no game effect. If so, remove it from the game. So if we completed this objective, basically it's like you damaged his tail, maybe cut it off so he can't hit you with it. So again, that's a really cool, like, mechanical effect of the game. Like, right, you're doing this weakness to him, and now he can't use a tail card. He only has 1 of them, but still, these cards are probably going to get shuffled multiple times. And the harder one says each player in the rear sector suffers 2 attack or damage ×2 unless they discard a green card from their hand. And if hit the tail has been completed, has no effect. If so, remove it from the game. So when this pops up, then you get rid of it out of the deck, so you're not keep redrawing it over and over. But yeah, if you didn't complete that, then now you have to worry about that. So this is definitely a cool thing there. So that was our Vyraxen. So just as a quick end note on this before we hop, end this video is, so what's really cool about these guys is because if you sit there and memorize every single one of their cards, and you memorize a symbol, and you know what they do, and you know how to counter their abilities, they're going to become a lot easier to beat. But if you're looking at the facts as if you don't memorize any of these, and you don't know what any of them are, and they're kind of just triggering, it's going to be a lot tougher game. Am I telling you to go memorize or have like some sort of cheat sheet or something out when you're playing these? No, I'm not saying that. But it's definitely be more interesting to like kind of play it. And I agree with what somebody I read on the Board Game Geek said. He said, kind of like if you're watching this video or like this, you read over your cards when you first get them. I think it's not a bad idea, like at one point, maybe before the game, maybe not immediately before the game, but maybe even right before the game. Read the cards ahead of time, kind of if each player knows what's coming up, at least an idea of it. You look at them, you have some idea of what you're doing. It's kind of like, hey, we studied, we prepped to fight this monster, we kind of know what its abilities are, but then when you go to actually play the game, you might remember them, you might not. And it kind of, guys, it simulates that being in the middle of combat, right? You can prepare all you want, you can read every textbook, you can read all these files on the monster you're hunting, but once you're actually in that combat, to remember while you're doing your actions and stuff's happening, you're taking damage and this and that, trying to remember what each one of those abilities are, could be very tricky. And I think that's what kind of makes this sort of fun, right? And I think even again with the up levels of difficulty to make that good too. Like, you just want to have a good time playing this, play prologue level, play expedition, play prologue. You want super hard challenges, play level 3, right? You're definitely gonna get it for that. And then even still, if you want to make the game even harder on yourself, some of the monsters will have nightmare mode. I don't remember all. Not everyone does. It's generally like one of each element. But you can always even make it harder just by adding more of these cards in. Because if they're triggering more often, some of the effects, you could change some. You could mix and match some, different things. So, alright, that's what we got for our fire monsters. Hope you guys are enjoying these videos. If so, come back, check out. We will hit up the next group of monsters in the next video. And it will be a little bit shorter, so I won't go through the monster tutorial part. Again, I'll just link people back to this video. See you guys later. Bye.